Let's go straight to our next guest. He's Matthew Bryza. He's a former White House official working under the Obama administration and joins us to talk about, well, what might come out of the meeting that Keir Starmer is due to have in the next hour or so with the US president. He's at his Turnberry golf course in Scotland, of course, been there since Friday. And he's been meeting with various foreign leaders, including Ursula von der Leyen, who's flown over from Brussels, no doubt on one of her many private planes available to her at the European Commission. Not allowed to do that if you're a private person, but if you're a European Commissioner, absolutely fine. But the Prime Minister has arrived at Prestwick Airport for that meeting about midday. We're going to have pictures from that around 12:30. But Matthew Bryza, what do you think is going to come of this meeting?
Well, maybe Prime Minister Starmer will be able to soften President Trump a little bit on aid to Gaza. Trump and the Israelis are really feeling the pressure on that, as we've seen in the last couple of days. Now there's this agreement for a 10-hour pause every day for we don't know how long, a week or so, and more aid getting in. But Trump's not going to yield very much at all in any way against Israel. And the other thing they'll talk about is trade, as you've been reporting in the UK. And Starmer would like to see removal of all tariffs on steel, on UK steel imports into the U.S. Trump was going to slap 50% tariffs on steel all over the world, reduced it, he said, to 25% on the UK. But there was a statement made by the U.S. Commerce Secretary Lutnick after the G7 meeting when this trade pact was agreed between Starmer and Trump that said that, well, the White House or Lutnick is going to clarify further possible reductions in U.S. tariffs on UK steel. So that's, I think, steel and Gaza.
So yeah, I mean, yes, indeed. Well, yes, I mean, we know that, of course, yes, they're still trying to sort of keep the President Trump on side on Ukraine. Or does seem that relationship with Zelensky does seem to be improving. Talking about, we'll come back to Gaza, but talking about the trade issue, that EU-US trade deal hailed as the biggest deal in history. It's a great deal for both sides, great deal for America, great deal for the EU. The reality is, of course, Ursula von der Leyen has got a better trade deal than she had, before yesterday for the EU countries, but nevertheless worse than it was before the tariff war was announced, big beautiful tariffs, but also worse than the UK has. A clear Brexit benefit. That said, both the EU and the UK still have worse relationship with America in terms of the tariffs than they had before those tariffs were imposed. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's symbolically important that there's this 10% tariff on the UK goods and cars and 15% on EU ones. That is, I think, an attempt by Trump to show support for Brexit. But you're right. The situation is worse with 15% tariff across the board for the EU. That's going to be tough on industry in Europe. Automakers, however, in Germany are happy because they were facing higher tariffs, 25% or more, 27.5%. Now it's down to 15%. But the initial reactions coming out of industrial groups in Europe today is not positive. That's true. And I thought it was outrageous that Trump said it's the biggest and most important agreement on any topic of all time.
Yeah, probably not. Wow. But remember the EU, I mean, they also agreed to buy $1 trillion worth of US military equipment, I mean, presumably to then pass on to Ukraine. That was part of that announcement a few weeks ago. But I mean, replace their own stocks, which they've already given to Ukraine. So I mean, the Americans definitely done better. Now, look, I mean, I mean, there's a time and a place for tariffs. We know that people have to protect. We need to protect our farms, our own steel industry against Chinese dumping of steel and things like that. However, a lot of us, including me, very critical of the American president's big tariff war on everybody. Has he, though, ended up playing an absolute blinder, and actually he's got a better deal for Americans?
Well, maybe for now. And I think one thing he's really focused on is raising more government revenue so that he can try to pay for the tax cuts that were just implemented. Yeah. But, and a lot of the critics of Trump's tariffs say that, well, this is just a tax on consumption in the United States.
Which it is. I mean, it'll just put prices up still.
It is, but the 15% tariff, as some industrial groups in Europe are saying, could be low enough that the exporters into the U.S. will just eat eat their margins, so that they'll earn less of a profit. That's something I experienced, actually. When I bought my first car, I was a U.S. diplomat, and I bought it in Scandinavia, where I was exempt from tax, and the base price of the car was lowered by the manufacturer from what I would have paid, in this case in Germany, because taxes are so high in Scandinavia. So I think at 15%, we'll see the industry in Europe eating their margins, and more revenue coming to the U.S. government.
So we shall see. That said, of course, the whole point of those tariffs was he would basically onshore a load of production, and therefore you wouldn't make money from the tariffs. And again, he has three different names and all mutually exclusive. Yeah. Let's go back to the issue of Gaza and aid, though, because a lot of pressure on Israel, but a lot of pressure on America, because they're the biggest, and the most influential supporter of Israel. But I mean, 10-hour pauses put in place. A lot of, the propaganda coming out of Gaza, I think, is and propagated by organisations like the BBC that my taxes go towards. I think has been utterly outrageous, and the use of some very questionable images of starving children who are not actually starving necessarily because of hunger, but are emaciated because of chronic disease, which both equally awful for them and their families. But this is a propaganda warfare that the West, particularly Europe, has fallen for, hasn't it?
Well, I don't know what the facts are really at base, because yes, you're right. They're showing these horrible photos of these emaciated children. When you look at the numbers are actually quite modest in terms of the overall population. But it's horrendous what's going on. But on Israeli TV, for example, those images really aren't being shown, and many Israelis think that this is pure hype, and that suffering and that starvation isn't happening. I mean, the UN is saying near famine conditions.
But they've been saying that for the best part of 2 years.
They have. Every day is about how healthcare is collapsing. There's no food getting in, no water.
And a lot of those aid agencies and bodies, they have been saying again and again and again that Hamas propaganda saying, 10 people were shot at this, by IDF soldiers. There's no footage of it. They weren't there. They're going on the word of, people working in the hospital and Hamas. I mean, I now don't believe a single word that anyone says, including aid agencies, about this war.
Yeah, it's very hard to get to whatever the ground truth is. And one part of the story that is not explained is that the reason why the trucks aren't being let in by the Israelis is not pure cruelty. It's that the revenues from those trucking companies goes to Hamas. And if you're in a war to the death with Hamas, you don't want to be supporting their revenue stream, just the same way we're putting tariffs on or sanctions on Putin's economy. Yeah,
it is quite bizarre. Do you think, in terms of, just finally, Donald Trump meeting with Keir Starmer, we're told they've got this little relationship, and we were told there was a bromance, le bromance between Macron and Trump before. Again, Macron invited to the inauguration, Starmer wasn't. I mean, do you think that he actually does have a sort of a good relationship with Keir Starmer, or is it just all for the cameras?
I think it's probably good, as you and I have discussed before. I mean, Americans love Brits. Trump is no exception. He's opening, I guess, his third golf course now, right, in Scotland. He has been flattered by Starmer. Starmer, provided an invitation to another state visit.
That's what he wants to be at the palace. That's what he cares about.
That's what he wants. And he's the only U.S. president who will ever have had 2 state visits so far to the UK. So, Starmer is, I'm not sure that Trump, he's certainly not afraid of Starmer, not intimidated by him. Yeah. Maybe he thinks he's a softie, but Trump enjoys the kindness and attention.
Yeah, that's what it is, isn't it? Matthew Bryza, great to talk to you, former White House official. Sam Armstrong's with me. Do you think that there is a real sort of simpatico relationship between these two men, or is it just Keir Starmer is just literally like, licking? Let's be honest.
I mean, to be clear, you could not get two people further apart.
On everything, personality, politics.
Top to bottom. But say what you like about Donald Trump, he is a big fan of the UK, of us, of our history, our culture and everything. This is the most Anglophile president we've ever had.
Yeah, we're not at the back of the queue. That's the key thing to know, isn't it?